Welcome to another edition of our Beat Diabetes Books and Quotes series, and today we'll be looking at the book Dr. Neal Barnard's Reversing Diabetes, subtitled The Scientifically Proven System for Reversing Diabetes Without Drugs. Now, if you know what I preach and what I advocate very much, you know that my ideas and his ideas are pretty much almost polar opposites. You may be saying, well, why would you even feature a book like this? Well, it's good to see what the other side is saying, number one. And number two, I've got this in my library, and I thought it might be good to just bring up a few things and just share where they're coming from. Now, some of you may say, Dennis, you're not even a doctor, and look at Dr. Neal Barnard. He's wearing a beautiful white doctor's coat, so he is a doctor. How could you disagree with a doctor? Well, there's a couple of points. Number one, he is not even a medical doctor. He's a psychiatrist. And, well, I mean, I guess technically they have to be medical doctors, but his training is in psychiatrist. He's called a non-practicing psychiatrist, but he's gotten fascinated with nutrition, diet, and diabetes. And so, but secondly, and more importantly, there's a lot of doctors I could name that would not agree with him. So if you say, Dennis, how can you disagree with a doctor? Well, there are doctors that disagree with doctors, lots of them. And so your job really, when it comes to trying to figure some things out about diabetes, is to decide which group of doctors am I going to go with, because they can be saying the very opposite things. So do I go with Dr. Jason Fung and his group and Dr. Richard Bernstein and those guys, or do I go with guys like Dr. Neal Barnard and some of the others that advocate whole foods and plant-based? Dr. Barnard is a vegan. He's not just a vegan, he's a vegan's vegan. He's the grandfather of all vegans, you might say. And he is passionate that we should not even eat any animal products at all. Not just don't eat meat, don't eat any animal products. Don't eat dairy, don't eat cheese, don't have butter, just nothing that came from an animal, all plants. Now, I have to kind of let you know where he's coming from. So I got this from the internet, I think it was Wikipedia. He's the founding president, this is important, listen carefully, the founding president of the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, PCRM. Founding president, Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. That may sound good. You're like, well, how can you argue with that? We want doctors to be responsible, right? But that whole title is somewhat disingenuous, because what they're really all about is animals and prevention of cruelty to animals. He goes on to say it is an animal liberation, research, and advocacy organization. They're all about don't eat animals, don't torture animals, don't research on animals, just leave those poor little critters alone. So Dr. Neal Barnard is an animal lover to the point where he thinks eating a steak is a sin, a crime, a horrendous thing. And if he believes that, well, of course, he's going to be looking for ways to show that it's not good for you, because he's not going to convince everybody that eating meat is just a sin. There's just too many of us around that don't have a problem with that. So if he can't convince you of that, he can at least tell you that it's not good for you. So you've got to keep that in mind. Now, if I was on the other side, if I thought, oh, it's terrible to be eating plants, those poor little plants, you're plucking them from the beautiful earth and you're eating those plants, that's a crime, that's a sin, that's a horrendous act, then of course I'd be trying to convince you that plants are no good for you, because I don't want you to touch my little plants. Well, of course, I don't believe that, but he does believe that about animals. All right, so anyway, in his book, he's going to try his best to convince you that you've got to cut out all animal products from your diet and eat all plant products, and you've got to cut out all fat, or nearly all fat, until there's hardly any fat left. Let me just quickly read you a few quotes, and then we'll talk about how in the world does this guy ever accomplish any good? And the answer is, yeah, he does actually help some diabetics, and we'll talk about that toward the end. He says, with listing foods to avoid: meats, poultry, fish, eggs, whites, and yolks. So in other words, don't just skip the yolks but eat the whites, just don't eat any part of the egg. All dairy products, regular and fat-free, milk, yogurt, cheese, ice cream, sour cream, butter, etc. So avoid it all. Anything that comes from an animal, stay away from. He goes farther than this, though. He doesn't even like plants or plant products that have very much fat in them. So he says avoid avocados, olives, and peanut butter, because we've got to stay away from the nasty fat. So not only does he hate animal products, he hates fat of all kinds. He's never saw a fat that he didn't hate. So that is a part of his doctrine, you might say. He's big on the GI index. Once you have determined you're going to eliminate meat, then when you're going to eat plants, choose plants that are lower GI, lower glycemic index. He says white baking potatoes are higher GI, sweet potatoes are lower. So go for the sweet over the white. He says old-fashioned oatmeal, which consists of whole oats, has a low GI, but quick cooking oatmeal is made by slicing the oat grains into fragments. That allows it to cook faster, which means a higher GI. So once again, go for the lower GI, lower glycemic index. Well, folks, I've done experiments on myself, and my wife Benedicta has done some. And in a way, he's right. If you go for brown rice over white rice, there's a slight improvement. If you go for whole oatmeal over sliced up oatmeal, quick oatmeal, there's a slight improvement. If you go for sweet potato over white potato, there's a slight improvement. But the emphasis is on the word slight. It's negligible. It's like if you jump up to 220 eating a white potato, and then you eat a sweet potato and you jump up to 198. You say, well, you see, I improved. Yeah, you did, but not enough to make any difference. It's kind of like one guy's coming at you with a big, heavy baseball bat, and the other's coming at you with a medium baseball bat, and you get to choose. You say, well, I want the guy with the medium baseball bat to beat me to death. It may take him a couple of more blows, but it doesn't matter whether you die from a heavy baseball bat or a medium-sized baseball bat. Just stay away. If you want to come attack me with a feather or a handful of cotton. Let's see how that does. But that's kind of the difference between some of these high GI and what they call low. They're not really low at all. A sweet potato is not low GI. I mean, based on what it does to my blood sugar, it's sure not. But he's all about that because that's about all he's got. One of his summary statements that describes the kind of diet he recommends is this. He talks about proportions and having a balanced dinner. And he says, you can vary these proportions if you like, as long as your plate is numero uno, vegan, numero dos, low fat, and tres, low GI. He says, as long as you're those things, vegan, low fat, low GI, you're in good shape. And of course, it has to be plant-based. So you get rid of the animal products, go for the vegan products, go for lower GI products, and all will be well. That may sound good, and if you're a person who knows nothing about diabetes, nothing about blood sugar and what makes it go up and what makes it stay more normal, you've never tested your blood sugar except maybe an occasional time in the morning, you know nothing about any of those things, and you read this, you may be impressed. You may say, wow, okay, that's what I'll do. I'll be vegan, I'll be low fat, I'll be low GI, and bam, I'm done, baby. Diabetes, sayonara, I'll see you later. But if you take your glucose meter into that scenario where you're eating all plant-based and you're going for sweet potatoes instead of white, brown rice instead of white, and you think you've really improved things, test yourself with your meter about an hour after you eat that meal and see what it does. And you'll find it's not that much difference. It's not enough to worry about. Again, the heavy baseball bat versus the medium-sized, very little difference. All right, another quote. He says, I do not recommend you make nuts a regular part of your diet. So he even differs from vegan about nuts. I mean, this guy is so fanatical. Not only must you get rid of all your animal products, you must get rid of nuts and avocados and olives and various plant-based products if they've got too much fat. He says, they're so fatty, they will make weight loss difficult, and they may interfere with your efforts to improve insulin sensitivity. So, I mean, he is like anti-fat to the max. And you know, it's enough to make you think Dr. Neal Barnard is not a real person. You know, you have to wonder, I don't think he's a real person. I think he's a hologram that came from about 1975, and he's beaming up to our present time. Or you might say it this way, he's on a ship that's sinking. The research is all proving him wrong, but he's with a few of his buddies waving the flag, low fat, low fat, low fat, plant-based, plant-based, plant-based. Well, so many people have jumped ship and they found rescue. He's hanging on to a sinking ship saying low fat. And he's coming straight from 1975 or 1980 or 1965, coming from days long past before we had done all the research that shows that a low carb and low sugar diet is far superior to a plant-based diet if you want to beat diabetes radically and quickly and thoroughly whip it. All right, one more quote and then I'll sum up with why could he possibly be successful at all. He says, avoid sugar, white bread products, and other high GI foods. These foods seem to raise triglycerides. Well, high GI foods, he says, seem to raise triglycerides. Well, he's right. Sugar does raise triglycerides, but basically all carbs do. When people go to a keto, low-carb, high-fat diet, their triglycerides virtually always take a nosedive. Many will report a loss of 100 points in their triglycerides from going keto for a few months. It almost always happens. You're eating more fat, you've got more fat on your plate, but less fat in your blood. And they don't like to admit this. I mean, he says, yeah, you should avoid sugar and white bread, white flour products because they raise triglycerides. He's right. But anytime you focus on a lot of carbs and sugars, you're going to raise your triglycerides. And anytime you start cutting those radically, you're going to lower your triglycerides. All right, well, enough of my rant, but let me ask this question. Can he help anybody? Does this book, Reversing Diabetes, actually do it? Does it actually help anybody? The answer is apparently, yeah, some people it does. If you go to the Amazon listing for this book, and you read some of the comments and some of the reviews, a lot of people will say he helped me and my A1C is down. Not everybody. Some people will say it went up with all these carbs and sugars, or all these carbs, I should say. He doesn't recommend sugar. But many will say he helped me and my A1C is down and I went from diabetic to non-diabetic. So it's not like people haven't been helped. You say, why is that, Dennis? Are they just all lying? Or what's the deal? How could that kind of an approach help anybody? Well, the answer in my mind, there's a couple of things I can think of. Number one, first of all, this is a diet that is different from the standard diet, and the standard diet is so bad, so radically bad, so terribly bad, so horrendous. What's the standard diet? Eat everything you like, fats, sugars, desserts, everything. And he says, no, cut the desserts, cut the sugar, and cut the meat products. So basically, he's taking the standard diet and converting it. Anytime you move from the standard diet, you're almost always going to improve. I guess that wouldn't be true if you had an ice cream diet. But normally, when you move from the standard diet to Mediterranean, to keto, to paleo, to vegan, to almost any diet, you're going to improve. And so people do improve when they go from a lifestyle where they just eat big old desserts and all kinds of stuff they shouldn't to a more plant-based diet. They do improve. Sometimes, not always. And the other thing is, anytime you move to a diet where you are cutting quite a few of the foods that you used to eat, like if you eat the standard diet and you say, all right, I'm going to go with Dr. Neal Barnard, I'm going to do it his way, you're going to chop off about a third of what you've been eating. And when you do that, guess what? You will normally lose weight. Not everybody does, because in some cases, eating all those carbs and plants is going to raise your insulin and you're going to have a hard time losing weight. Many report that, but some, they do lose weight. Let's be honest. Some people on a vegan diet, going from standard to vegan, they do lose weight. And if you lose weight, you are very likely to help your diabetes, your A1C, your fasting glucose. You're likely to improve. So, no, I don't think those people that are commenting under this book on Amazon and say, oh, you helped me so much, I don't think they're liars. I think, maybe there's one or two, but I think for the most part, they're telling the truth. He did help them because they cut out all the sugar. They cut out the white bread, the white flour, a lot of the processed foods. But it wasn't because they don't eat steaks anymore, or because they gave up butter, or because they gave up cream. But it's because they moved from a standard junk diet, the worst possible diet, to his vegan diet. But I could put up all kinds of people that have reported that the keto diet helped them, or a low-carb diet helped them. Dr. Bernstein could, Dr. Jason Fung could. There's all kinds of people we could put forward and say, hey, what about this guy? What about this guy? What about this guy? What about this guy? I mean, they're all over the place. As far as I can see, if you're determined that you're going to eat the standard diet and somebody can convince you to go his way, you've improved your situation a bit. You're better off. But if you go the low-carb way and you quit worrying about fat and you quit worrying about the dietary philosophy of 1975 and go with a more modern approach, which we've discovered is that carbs and especially sugar and fructose are a nightmare for your insulin resistance. If you understand that and you do the low-carb thing, you'll be so much better and you can get there faster. And if you do say, well, I want to try it, I think it's worthy of a try, well, who am I to stop you? I mean, this guy's wearing a white jacket, right? So, I mean, he must know something. But I'll tell you what, take your glucose meter with you and start testing your blood sugar about an hour to an hour and a half after you finish your meals. And just see if these so-called low GI foods are all that superior to the high GI foods. I think you'll see that they're not that much better. All right, well, this is a book report / rant, but there you have my 2 cents for it. Again, I'm not a doctor, but there's a lot of doctors I respect that would vehemently disagree with this doctor, who, by the way, his expertise is psychiatry, not nutrition. God bless you. I want you to know that I have another YouTube channel. It's called by my name, Dennis Pollock, and on this channel, my wife Benedicta and I teach the basics of the Bible in a simple, user-friendly fashion. Normally, on Mondays, I post what I call a video devo, in which I take various Bible topics and share scriptures to help you understand the subject a little better. On Thursdays, I post Bible studies by Benedicta and me as we sit at our dining room table and discuss various portions of the Scriptures. We cover book studies and Bible character studies. So catch me on Mondays sharing devotional talks, and Benedicta and me on Thursdays as we study the greatest book in the world, the Bible. Check in the description to find a link to our Bible teaching channel, which is called by my name, Dennis Pollock.